Hey, welcome to Awkwardly Awesome Podcast, episode number 61. I'm your host, Jason Freeman. I'm a perseverance coach and a professional speaker who ironically has a speech impediment, which I turned into a gift. I specialize in speaking to junior high and high school students about kindness, courage, perseverance, and confidence. Today, my guest is Ed, Ed Evarts. Ed Edwards, which his name's a bit of a tongue twister coming out of my mouth. But you are going to be amazed by this man. He's humble, he's kind, and he's done a lot of brilliant stuff. So let me quickly read you his bio before bringing him on, which is Ed Edwards is a leadership coach, team effectiveness coach, and small business coach who is the author of two books, Raise Your Visibility and Value, Undercover the Loss Out of Connecting on the Job, and Drive Your Career. Oh, three books actually. 9 high and bad ways to take responsibility for your career. He's also host of a bi-weekly podcast. Check out this title, Be Brave at Work. Before we bring on Ed, it's back. Check this out. Thank you, Chris Taylor.
Today's guest, Ed Evarts.
Hey, welcome, Ed. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Jason. I'm really excited to be chatting with you. And I love your entry in respect to what you speak about, because you talk about courage and confidence. And those are two things people need in order to be braver at work. So we continue to demonstrate we have a lot in common.
Sweet. We do. But we are not located in the same place. Where are you hailing from today? I mean, I know, but for everyone else.
I'm in a town named Wakefield, Massachusetts. I'm about 20 minutes north of Boston.
Nice. And is it cold there?
It is. It is a chilly week. I just looked out the window. It's in the mid 30s today, and it's been getting to like 40-ish. The winters seem to be getting a little bit warmer in New England. I can remember when I was littler that between November and March it was snow all the time, and now we have days in this winter that get up to the 50s and 60s. And I don't know if it's global warming or what it might be, but it's not always as chilly as it used to be. But today it's in the 30s.
Okay, cool. Yeah, cool, and literally it's cool there. But this concludes the softball questions, Ed. So should we get into it? Ed?
Yeah, let's do it. Bring it on.
Oh, cool. You paused for a sec. In what ways were you born a leader?
Well, my father was in retailing, and he spent a number of years in leadership roles in a variety of organizations. And I was one of those geeky little kids who used to follow his father around. And so I used to observe leadership even as a young little kid. And when I went to college, I aspired to manage and supervise others. I don't know that I would have called it leadership at the time, but from my perspective, it was more management and supervisory perspectives. And graduating college and entering into workforce, the roles I obtained continued to get larger and larger and broader and broader. And at some point, I guess I became a leader in my organization. And so, I think leadership for me has always been something that is compelling, that is very difficult, that you do every moment. And when I transitioned to be a leadership coach, I took the 25 to 30 years of experience I had as a leader and now work and help others grow and evolve their leadership skills as well.
So, what were, I mean, like it was lucky that your dad was in the industry and that you were attentive and wanted to learn. What are a few major points where you learned things about leadership that would strengthen your ability to lead?
Well, I think the first thing that I think about are times where I worked for somebody whom I thought was a great leader. And these were
Mm.
people who became mentors. These are people who cared about me as an individual looking to do good work and grow and evolve my leadership skills. It's hard to do on your own. You can read books, you can watch webinars and do all sorts of things, but you really need to practice it and see what happens. And so I certainly worked, not always, but I had a few occasions where I worked with somebody or for somebody who just really inspired and motivated me in order to become a better leader. And then when I think back on my last employment experience, which was at a company called Iron Mountain, which is also based in Boston, I had a number of leadership roles in a very evolving, fast moving, changing environment. And you learn a lot about connecting with people, building great relationships, having a great reputation in that organization, things of that nature, which can influence and inspire your leadership skills. Leadership isn't always about little things that you do, but it's about how people talk about you at the water cooler. And you want to ensure that you always operate and behave in a way that if anybody ever talked about you at the water cooler, it was positive and progressive, not negative and gnarly, right? So those are a couple of the ways and examples that I focused on and worked to develop my skills as a leader.
H- How do you teach people how to like embody that leader full time? So often we are brilliant when we feel good and not so brilliant when we don't feel good. How do you help someone integrate that so they can show up day after day?
Well, first off, everybody has that story. There's nobody who thinks of themselves as the best leader ever, who never made a mistake and grew and grew and grew and grew. And, I would hope the president of the United States would tell you that they're not perfect and don't always make perfect decisions. So, it's important to remember, Jason, that everybody has a unique story, that there's not some model that we're all chasing, that if we can find that model, suddenly we're going to become a great and fantastic leader. So it's really working with people to understand their particular background, their particular influences, and what their goals are. And quite frankly, what I do with clients is I look for gaps between where they are and where they want to go and look to kind of tighten up those gaps so the activities they focus on help get them closer to where they want to be. When I wrote the book, Drive Your Career, the goal there was to help people drive their career, not be a passenger and not sit in the back seat and just let what happen, but what steps can I take and what things can I do in order to ensure that I get there? So recognizing that everybody has a unique story, understanding what that story might be and what their goals are can help them become a more effective leader.
So you're saying there's no cookie cutter way to be like the perfect leader?
There isn't. There are a million books out there, all with different leadership models. On Google and on the internet, there are just tons of ways that you can look up information about being a great leader. You really have to know yourself best. And in the work that I do with clients, we focus on self-awareness, which is being highly self-aware of your strengths and your areas of opportunity so that you can manage yourself more effectively. And everyone's self-awareness and everyone's self is different. what motivates them, the biases they have, the goals that they have change, and magic model out there that fits everybody. It's your magic model based on your situation and what your goals might be.
We'll get back to areas of opportunity, which is a brilliant wording. But first, Tim, who is a brilliant leader himself, asks, "What do you love most about leadership?"
So I love knowing, and this is only, I think, mostly in reflection, but knowing something I've said, something that I've done has helped somebody grow and evolve their career as well. They say great leaders aren't necessarily themselves great, but they surround themselves with great people to help influence and drive goals and objectives at organizations. So, of course, most leaders are pretty good at what they do, but you have to surround yourself with great people who want to influence and develop their leadership capabilities. And I just love knowing and hearing from people who say, "Hey, Ed, 5 years ago, we had a conversation. You really opened my eyes to a couple of areas that I hadn't thought about. Thank you." Because that really helped influence me as a leader. That's what I personally love about leadership.
So, there's so many ways I want to go here. T- 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 Tim also says everybody is awkwardly awesome. So there's this perception that I've had, and maybe other people have too, that we should be able to lead perfectly and always know what to say and never make a mistake. And how do you help leaders deal with their mistakes in a way that they don't diminish themselves, but learn from their mistakes and move forward?
Well, I would just first love to address that, perspective. I have yet to meet a perfect leader. Behind closed doors, most leaders would tell you that they're not perfect, that they are afraid or worried, or the big question that people love to ask corporate executives: "What keeps you up at night?" As if all corporate executives can't sleep, right? That they're all awake every night worrying about things.
They
They're not.
have an insomnia club.
They're not perfect. And that's why I love the title of your podcast, because I think they all are. And I think all of us are. It's not just leaders. We're awkwardly awesome, right? That we can be awesome if we can build our self awareness and be open to how we can operate in different ways to be more effective. And, most of us are awkward at what we do and how we do it unless we have an open set of eyes in respect to how people experience us in the workplace. So, I think it's important to recognize, and this is a real myth that exists within the United States and I'm sure globally, that the more senior you are at an organization, the more perfect people think you are. And that as a president of a company, you must be perfect because you had to be perfect to be president. And you know everything and you know everyone. And yet you speak to that person and they would tell you, "Ed, I am far from perfect, right? I do this wrong and I don't know how to do this. And I surround myself with great finance people because I've never been a great finance person." And you say, "Well, how did you become president of the company?" And they would tell you mostly that it's things like reputation, relationships, and influence. So, there's this myth that the higher you are in an organization, the more perfect you are. And in reality, it's the exact opposite. We are all very much the same. Certainly, some of us are better than others at certain things. But if we try and we put a focus and effort on a particular area, our likelihood for becoming more awesome is even greater.
As we try and put a focus on a particular area, a likelihood of becoming more awesome is even greater. I love that. What would you tell a hypothetical young leader who comes to you after making a big mistake at work and goes, "Ed, I had this dream. I got this leadership role, but you see, I've made this huge mistake. I'm just not cut out for this job?
Well, I would tell you that I would do a couple of things, Jason. One is I wouldn't talk about the mistake they made. I would talk first about why they feel the way they feel.
Hmm.
Lots of people make mistakes and fix it and move on. And as great leaders would tell you, don't think about the mistake, think about what you learned, and then apply that learning so you don't make it again. I've never been a what I call snapshot manager.
Ed, Ed, Ed. Um. Oh, that sounded really good. I hope it comes back. Speaking of imperfection, are you
There.
back?
All right, technology at its best, right? Nothing like
Well,
live technical issues.
the last thing I heard is I've never been a snapshot manager, and I was leaning forward, then you froze.
So I've never been a snapshot manager. I recognize people make mistakes. They will make mistakes now and again. We're all human. What I look for as a leader is, well, what did they learn from that mistake? And how do we ensure that it doesn't happen again? If somebody repeats a mistake on a recurring basis, then you have a performance management issue that you need to address through a performance management.
Uh, uh, through a performance management. Through,
Yeah, performance management system, right? That's where you want to address issues that happen on a recurring basis because the person's not learning from the last error or problem. Most people don't come to me to say, Ed, I think I'm in the wrong job, or, I made a huge mistake. Most people don't focus on it to that type of degree. What they think about is what could they do a little bit differently to be more effective going forward. That's where I need to help them be, so they know that, hey, you're in this role for a reason. You earned it. You got here for a reason. We all are imperfect. Let's focus on what you can learn and do differently, not get caught up in the mistake that you feel that you've made. And, there's no advantage to getting all bummed out about it. Let's talk about what you can do differently to move forward.
that's so empowering. In my work, I talk about the power of doing our imperfect best, which is basically the noticing the imperfections and learning from them and using it to move forward, like you're talking about. Uh, hmm. Technology is interesting. Uh, hmm. Ed, yeah, you're back.
I'm back. It's too bad we're live, because if we weren't, you could just edit all this out.
Yeah. There's advantages to being live, but are you still here? Hmm. Hmm. This is challenging. I, yeah. This is the perfect example of imperfect best in leadership. Things come up and we don't know what to do next. And it just went off and is coming back on, hopefully. I was just saying this is a perfect example of what leadership is. Like sometimes things happen suddenly and you've got to figure it out and move forward. On one hand, we could spend the rest about the hour lamenting technology, but on the other hand, we could just say, hey, these challenges happen. How do we go forward?
Yeah, it's a great example of that. We all worry about technological issues anytime that we're live, and here we are experiencing it ourselves. So, hey, let's keep moving forward and let's see what happens.
So shifting gears. How do I love this question because I might have experienced some of it. How do talented and ambitious people sometimes get in their own way? And how can they get back out of their own way? Hmm. Hmm. um. Interesting. I like that question so much that he's pausing to think about it. Huh. Huh. Yeah. No. He's off again. This is in the moment.
All right, so let me answer your question. So, talented people, how do they get out of their own way? Most of the clients I work with are people who are great at what they do. So, they're a fantastic attorney, they're a fantastic pharmaceutical engineer, they're a fantastic manufacturing executive. They know what it is they need to do. The skill area they lack is how to do it, how to motivate people, how to engage people, how to inspire people. They haven't had training and learning. They didn't go to college to learn how to inspire people. They went to college to learn about economics and financial management and things of that nature. So, we step in order to help them do that. And the way we do that is to build their self awareness on how people experience them in the workplace. And so you have to have a base point to start from. And a great way to do that is a 360 assessment or something where you can collect feedback from others on how they experience you in the workplace so that you can then build from that. And if you're open to hearing that feedback, and typically it's confidential, so no one else sees it, you're the only person who sees the culmination of all of this information. If you're open to seeing it, your likelihood for doing something about it is greater. So, talented, great people out there are fantastic at what they do. Where they might need some assistance or greater awareness is around how they interact with others, how people experience them in the workplace. And quite frankly, that's what people like you and I do is we help them understand how people are experiencing them so that they can take steps to do things a little bit differently to have a better impact.
Could you say more about what a 360 assessment is?
Sure, 360 assessment is called a 360 because you collect feedback confidentially from bosses, peers, and subordinates, right? So it's a full 360 on you
Oh, well, bosses, peers, subordinates.
and also clients as well if you're in a type of organization in which you interact with clients. So it's collecting feedback from all different levels of the organization, from different types of people in the organization, focused on you and how they experience you in the workplace. It's meant to be a positive, open conversation, even though it's one sided because you're collecting and reading a report. Necessarily all the information presented is confidential and anonymous, but for folks who are looking to hear and read how people experience them in the workplace, both the good ways and some of the challenging ways, and then are prepared to do things a little bit differently in order to improve those experiences, your likelihood for success is significantly greater. If you're not interested in hearing it and you think you're perfect and you don't think you can do anything better, your likelihood for success is marginal because it's not accurate and you need to be open to the feedback of others in order to continue to grow and evolve.
Have you seen leaders transform their practices after getting a 360?
I have, you know,
Yeah, we're back to we're back to the pause. There's a lot of pauses during this episode, so for you to think about the po- phone. Oh, you're back.
So I was saying that one of the challenges of being a leadership coach is I'm not there to hold your hand throughout your career. I might be with you for 6 months or 9 months, and I can't make you do anything. I can inspire you to do things. I can help build your self awareness. I can help keep your head on straight. I can help you think about ways to do things a little bit differently in order to be more effective. I just can't make you do it. Right. So it's important that if you do want to collect from people how they experience you in the workplace, and there are some gaps between how you are seen and what you how you want to be seen. And so it really starts with you. You could have the greatest coach in the world work with you, but unless you're prepared to do things a little bit differently and take it internally in respect to how you operate, your likelihood for success again will be marginal because you just won't be making the type of progress that you want to make.
This brings up what would you advise a coaching client about how can a coaching client be a get the most out of a coaching program?
Well, I think there's a few things that need to be in place for a coaching experience to be effective. The first thing is you have to want to be coached, right? You have to be open to hearing from others how they experience you, whether you think it's true or not. So, whether it's true or not is irrelevant. If that is their perception of you, that is what
Mm.
you have to take in consideration in order to make progress. So, first off, you have to want to be coached. You have to want this experience. Fortunately, I would say 95% of the people I've worked with want to be coached. I've had a few that haven't want to be coached. They were part of a program and everybody was getting coached and they just weren't into it. And it's not a good experience for the coach or for the client, but they have to want to be coached. Secondly, you have to work in an environment that allows you to practice things. If you're hearing things that you're not doing well and you're coming up with ways that you need to do them differently in order to improve them, you have to practice it a little bit. It's not like a magic switch you just turn.
Uh, Eric says hi to both awesome leaders. Thanks, Eric. um, yeah. This is challenging, and what do I mean? As really talking about stepping into a coaching to being coached, and so
So let me just recap that quickly if I can, Jason. Just three things that need to be in place. You have to want to be coached. You have to be open to hearing feedback about how people experience you in the workplace, both good and constructive. And you have to work in an environment that lets you practice in order to make improvement. You can't just make practice, you can't make perfection by just doing it once, right? You have to figure out ways to do it in order for it to have the outcome that you're looking for.
why is practice so important?
Well, you just look. I'm not a big fan of sporting metaphors, but if you just look at sports, they will tell you that Tiger Woods just didn't get up and start hitting a golf ball 300 yards, right? He takes practice, and it took practice for him to get that way, and he's probably not a great example because of his current medical situation. But golfers practice every day and hit hundreds of golf balls in order to do what you see on TV. So practice is something that we have undervalued in organizations, because when you get into an organization and you're made the director of marketing or the vice president of sales, people expect that you have all the answers and know how to do everything. And again, people are imperfect and I don't know how to do everything. And this is also a new role. So I need to figure out what I need to do a little bit differently in order to make progress. And it might take practice. So I wish organizations provided people time and recognize the need to practice things that they want to do a little bit differently to be more effective. Again, culturally, we just don't live in that type of environment. We live in a very fast-paced, change-oriented environment where we don't have time for practice. But practice is a key influencer in how people can operate in order to be a better leader.
Did you see the kudos from Eric Swanson?
I
Pass the
did.
cards.
My buddy Eric.
Yeah, Eric. Eric's so nice. So our workplaces are what they are at the moment, which I guess didn't need to be stated. But so what's the importance of being brave at work, Ed? Shouldn't we just go to work and put in our hours and clock out and get a paycheck and call it good?
Well, I wish that's what everyone experienced. If that's what they experience, that would be great. But if you have a significant other and they come home from work and you ask, "How was your day?" I'm sure there's going to be a story or a situation that annoyed them, or there's a person at work that they're frustrated with. Whatever it might be. Our reality is much different than that perfect world you just described. So.
And we're back.
There's also this.
Okay,
Hey,
good.
there's also this belief and behavior that I don't need to be brave at work, right? That things will get better on their own, or I could just ignore it and it will go away. And unfortunately, that's just not the reality. So the reality is that if we can help others and put being brave under the heading of helping others who aren't perfect and who need to know about how people are experiencing them a little bit differently, our workplaces would be a lot better. But unfortunately, because our workplaces are very fast paced, change all the time, leaders change, roles change, priorities change, we find very little time to build relationships and be candid with each other on how we're currently experiencing you so that I can help you be more effective. Unfortunately, we avoid it, or we're intimidated by it. We're afraid of it. We're fearful that if I talk to my boss about something they could be doing a little bit differently to be more effective, that I'm going to get fired or be looked upon poorly, things of that nature, Jason. So, it is something that we don't do as much as we should. And ironically, we should be doing it a lot more.
Do you have a few examples that you can share on the air that are okay to share of people being brave at work?
Well, if I can, I'd love to share just a couple of examples of people who weren't brave at work, and then maybe give a couple of people who were. But I do. So I am writing my third book, Be Brave at Work, and it's the lessons I've experienced as an executive and leader in an organization for 25 years. It's lessons I've learned from my clients over the last 14 years. It's lessons from the podcasts that I've been hosting for 2 years about bravery in the workplace. And I've interviewed people and will continue to interview people. But one of the first people I interviewed is somebody who actually quit her job because she worked for a boss who had a behavior which was showing up late that was so frustrating and irritating that she couldn't take it and decided to leave. And I said, "Well, gee, did you ever say something to your boss about this behavior of showing up late for meetings, showing up late for conference calls, of course, during the pandemic, Zoom calls, constantly late, or changing meetings at the last minute and saying, 'Hey, I can't make it. Let's do it again tomorrow,' whatever."
Yeah.
And she didn't. So she actually took the effort to leave her job, which I think took more effort than having a candid conversation with her boss about a behavior that, quite frankly, wasn't just impacting her, but was impacting everyone. So I think our listeners can probably sit back and think about a behavior or a person at work who drives them crazy, right? That they have a behavior or a situation that conflicts with their values or their expectations, and it's causing a conflict and drives them crazy. So, the list is endless. A lot of the people.
On that example, how would you have started that conversation with your boss, like this is the person who can fire you. How would you have courageously opened that conversation?
Well, the first place I would start is asking about the relationship they have with the boss. Do you feel like you have a good relationship with your boss? And let's just presume for our example, Jason, that the answer is yes, that I feel I do have a good relationship with my boss. Great. Then the next step might be to have a conversation with your boss. And I recognize bravery. That's why I
Yeah.
say, Jason, I love working for you. I love my job. I love the organization. There's a couple of things I've observed that I think if you did a little bit differently, you would have a more positive impact on me and the team. Are you interested in hearing it? You always have to ask for permission as well. So you want to ensure you have a good relationship. You want to first start asking if you can talk about it. You just don't go in and start talking about it. You have to first ask, and you have to ask if they're open to hearing it, because some bosses aren't. And there's no model for great leadership. There's no model for a great relationship with your boss. There are some bosses out there whom this will never work with. And you have to make different decisions about what you want to do with your career if you work for a boss who is impossible to work for. But if you ask your boss if they're open to hearing it and your boss says yes, I recommend you say, great, let's sit down next week. Maybe during our one-on-one, I have a couple of things I'd love to share with you, again, that I'd like you to listen to and see if there's some things that you can be doing differently to be more effective. So that's really just the entryway into the conversation. And if your boss is open to it, and by scheduling it another week, any emotion or temperature that it raised can settle a little bit. You can then go in and say, hey, here's a couple of things that I've observed that I think that if you did them a little differently would be more effective. Here's how I think you might think about doing it. I'm not looking for an answer right now. I'm not expecting you to say great idea or terrible idea, whatever it is, but please consider the suggestions I'm making. And then next week, let's talk about your reactions and thought about it and see if we can make some positive progress. I mean, that's a general way, Jason, that people can have an impact on their boss in a way that can be helpful and, quite frankly, helps you build even a stronger relationship with your boss in ways that can help you professionally.
So a few crucial things. When you don't just march into the office and start spouting about, you're always late, my gosh. You ask permission to share, and you schedule a time for ways away. So to lower the adrenaline level and make it more creative discussion than a reactionary discussion.
Yeah, I will tell you the one thing that can ruin a great conversation is emotion. And as soon as somebody starts getting emotional about something, I would encourage all of our listeners to pause the conversation and say, gee, I didn't think what I had to say would have this type of reaction, or it seems like you're getting pretty upset about what we're talking about. Why don't we pause and stop for a minute? You can always do that. You're always in charge of the conversation. Let's just pause and stop for a minute. Let's either talk about it next week or maybe tell me why you're reacting in the way that you're reacting. But keep in mind, Jason, I brought this up in order to help you. You always have to remind that person that you're not trying to hit them across the head with a 2x4, and you're not trying to judge them, and you're not trying to belittle them. You are trying to help them. And if they're looking for help and want help because they said, yes, I do, then let's keep talking. But if you're now interpreting what I'm saying as a judgment or belittlement, let's stop, because that's not what I intended to do. So every conversation has an owner. And in this particular conversation, even though your boss is more senior than you own the conversation and you have to manage it effectively.
Or I guess, and this is just in a general conversation station context for a sec, but I guess I could use that even, or anyone could use that even themselves. Say, hey, I notice this discussion is making me feel emotional, and I hadn't expected that. Can we pause this conversation for a day or two and come back to it when I feel more relaxed, and maybe you do too?
Well, that's why it's so important that we start with what's the nature of your relationship with your boss, because you want this to be a two-way street. This is not just you talking and telling your boss how you're experiencing them in ways they could operate a little bit differently to be more effective. You need your boss to be open and conversational about it. And they need
Mm,
to potentially say, hey, I'm feeling as though what you're saying is causing me to have a negative impact. So maybe we could pause for a little bit and talk a little bit about it later or tomorrow. You don't have to be the only one to say it, but the likelihood is probably you observing your boss's behavior more than they will. Sometimes we just don't see ourselves getting upset, or we get lost in our upsetness and we don't realize it until it's too late, but you're recognizing it immediately, right? So, this is one of the main areas that people have concern around in speaking with their boss. Is they're worried that this conversation is going to go south, right? That as
mm.
soon as I open my mouth and start to give you some feedback, that you're not going to receive it well, and now it's going to be a problem. But if you focus it around relationship, if you ask for permission to share it, you focus on helping and you echo that on a recurring basis, and that you watch the body language and watch conversation with your boss, your likelihood for having an effective conversation that helps your boss, which improves your relationship and improves things for you professionally, is greater than not saying anything at all.
Um, profound. Now, do you want to give another example when someone was not brave at work, or a positive example of being brave at work? Either one.
Yeah, let me give a positive example. And candidly, I heard this today. So I did a talk a couple of weeks ago at a local college for college employees, not students, but college employees.
Mm-hmm.
And we got into a conversation about career development. And I suggested a model to everybody about finding time to talk with your boss, not about projects, not about initiatives, not about clients, but about you and how you're doing at work, what you love about your job, and what opportunities there might be that you can start working on now in order to have, 2 or 3 years down the road, not next week. And it's not because you're unhappy. And one of the individuals at the meeting came up to me afterwards and said, you know what, I really would love to have that type of conversation with my boss. It's going to be hard and I'm nervous. And I said, I get it and I understand. So let's connect before you do it. So he contacted me. We talked about the ways that he could approach his boss to have this type of conversation. Again, in my mind, it's a very positive, future focused conversation, but this is not something people do all the time with their boss, right? So having a unique conversation with your boss can be nerve wracking. I got an email from him today that he had the conversation with his boss, and he, quote unquote, was pleasantly surprised by her response, that she
Ah,
loved the fact that he came forward,
ah.
that she thinks that, quote unquote, the world is his oyster, and that she's thrilled to be able to help him think about down the road what next steps there might be so he can work on it now. If you don't know what your next steps are, then what are you working on, right? You should always be doing the best you can do in your current job, but ensure that your current job is leading you to your next opportunity, right? You don't want to end up in a dead end experience. So he was brave at work. He had a conversation with his boss that he has never had with a boss before. And from my perspective, it paid off because he had a very rewarding and, I think, relationship building type conversation that I'm sure will benefit him for years to come.
This might be a crucial point. Being brave didn't only affect his boss, but it affected himself. He feels more confident, more, more enlivened by his own bravery.
Oh, definitely. That's one of the beauties of bravery at work is it grows, right? That, once you do it and you realize it doesn't hurt. I'm not suggesting you do it every day, but, once or twice a year, 2 or 3 times a year, there will be behaviors and things on the part of others that if they're open to hearing it, they will listen. And that's why you always want to ask for permission to talk about it. So, and then if you do it and it works well, others will do it, right, with their bosses.
Mm.
And this particular individual actually knew somebody else at the meeting, and they had met for lunch to talk about it. So I'm anxious to hear if the other colleague the guy who had a conversation with his boss, his friend had a conversation with his boss, right? Because that shows that it can grow and develop. And I just think this is a fantastic experience for employees to do at work, which is to talk about their own career development versus project goals and clients, and ensure that what they're doing is helpful to their organization.
So you really encourage employees to be proactive in their own career development.
I do, right. And you had mentioned in the opening the title of my second book, Drive Your Career. And in it, the subtitle is about taking responsibility for your own success. There is nobody going to ride in on a horse and save the day and, ensure that everything goes the way that you need to go in order to be a successful leader. You own ensuring that what you're working on and the way that you're working on it influences your future steps. If you're not doing a good job in your current role, either because it's not a good role or whatever else might be influencing or impacting you, your likelihood for success is diminished, right? So you want to ensure that you're taking time to think about, what do I need to work on? And is this job helping me get there? And if not, what can I do differently to help me get there as I continue to grow and develop my career? This happens at different points in people's lives. I'm not saying everybody who's 23 should know what they want to be when they grow up. I'm much older than 23, and I'm still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up.
You're 25 at least.
At least 25. But this happens at different points in people's life. But when it shows up, that's when you have to start driving your career and recognizing that there's only one person responsible for your own success, and that's you.
Speaking of driving your career, how can being empathetic accelerate your career?
Well, I think empathy is a extremely strategic behavior on the part of leaders across organizations. It's also absent across organizations, again, in the US and I'm sure globally. Empathy today is considered to be a soft skill. It's considered to be, squishy in respect to how we operate with others. And I believe empathy is a strategic skill because it helps people understand that you are human, that you're open to understanding where they are, not how to get to where you are, but understand where they are, and that you don't have to agree with it as a problem, but you have to be there to listen to it and talk about some next steps they could take in order to make progress. Being empathetic helps build relationships. It helps individuals stay more engaged, and it helps organizations achieve their objectives. Leaders who are not empathetic are seen as cold, clinical, hard to work with. They are not talked positively about at the water cooler. I'm not suggesting you have to be empathetic all of the time, but you have to know and be observant of your workforce and demonstrate empathy on a regular basis in order to ensure that they stay connected to you.
You said that being empathetic doesn't mean you have to agree with someone. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, I think a lot of people think that empathy means that I agree with whatever it is that is troubling you. And I don't personally believe that that's the case. I think people want to know that first you recognize that they are not themselves, right? I mean, you can't demonstrate empathy unless you see something different in somebody. Their behavior is a little darker. They're not operating in the way that they typically operate. They seem distracted, etc. And you have to, again, ask for permission to talk with them about what it is that you'd like to talk about, which is that their behavior seems a little differently than normal. You don't have to agree with what the issue is. They might have seen a bad movie over the weekend, or it's a movie you loved, or maybe their pet bird died and you've never had a pet bird, so you can't even relate to that type of experience. Whatever it might be, you don't have to agree with what it is that they are saying is problematic. But what's key, Jason, is you have to recognize that it's having a negative impact on them. It's not about you, it's about them. And you would say something like, wow, it seems like this is having a really dramatic impact on you. What can I do to help? Right? I mean, that's empathy. It's not, oh, that's silly, or really, that's bothering you. I mean, that's not empathy. Empathy is saying, wow, it sounds as though this issue is having a really dramatic impact on you. How can I help you?
And it's not trying to one up them.
What can we do in order to? No, it's not
Right?
trying to one up them. It's not trying to judge what it is that's they're experiencing. It's acknowledging the very simple act of acknowledging that whatever it is that's bothering them is bothering them.
Changing subjects quick. What is more powerful than performance appraisals?
Well, in Drive Your Career, we talk about the expectation that people need to hear from their boss about how they're doing. And Drive Your Career comes from my 14 years as a leadership coach and stories and experiences that I've heard on a recurring basis. And one of the stories that I've heard on a recurring basis is the absence of feedback or performance assessment that people get. Or if they do get a performance review, it's always with, bells and whistles, right? They're the best person ever. And I say, look, I think that's fantastic that you got that type of review. I don't think that's a problem. What did your boss say that you could do a little bit differently in order to continue to grow and develop? And that's where the big goose egg shows up. Nothing. They didn't give me any critical feedback about anything I could do any differently, not better or worse, but differently. And I say, well, you need to go back, right? Because there's a couple of questions you need to ask. To ask your boss about. One is, certainly thank them for the performance review, and you're thrilled that they're happy about the work that you're doing. But the question you need to ask is, what's one or two things I could be doing differently to be more effective? There has to be something. I'm not that perfect, right? I even think there's things I could be doing differently to be more effective. So it's part ensuring that you're not getting all rosebuds and petals of a performance review and going off and now thinking that you're perfect, but thanking your boss and asking for feedback. The second challenge that people experience beyond getting a perfect review is no feedback. I've had people say, I've worked here 5 years. I've never gotten a performance review. Have you had feedback with your boss? No, we never talk about anything of that nature. So nobody cares about you more than you. And if you're not getting any feedback, you need to collect feedback. And in the book, I don't call it positive feedback. I call it feedback, because sometimes bosses avoid feedback because they have something hard to say. They're not being brave at work. They don't know how to tell you that they're unhappy about something. So they just avoid it and hope that it'll go away, or they hope that you'll get better, whatever it might be. So I would encourage all of our listeners that if you got a performance review that was all rosebuds and rainbows, that you go back and say, thank you so much for that performance assessment, but I'd really like to know also what I could be doing differently to be more effective. And if you're not getting feedback, find time. And this will take bravery at work, but find time to schedule a career development conversation with your boss to say, hey, I guess culturally here, we're not required to give feedback. And rather than take on that battle, I still would love to hear from you what I could be doing differently, or what career options I might have as I think about growing and continuing to add value to this organization. I'm very happy with what I'm doing. I'm enjoying my job. I'm not looking to change tomorrow, but I want to make sure what I'm doing is moving me in the right direction.
And you're talking about taking responsibility for your career, and that's really taking responsibility for your career and your growth. And
yeah, it's a very subtle change happening in our culture. And I can still remember being a leader 20 years ago, and at organizations I worked in, we were in charge of your learning and development and career growth. And we signed you up for training classes, and you had to do this class and this class and this class, whatever. But we were kind of in charge as the company of you. Today, most organizations are not doing that. And while they may offer training and things of that nature, it's more voluntary, and you have to go out and look for it. So, maybe a good takeaway today, Jason, from our conversation is, people recognizing that nobody knows you better than you. You need to think about what you want to do with your career and where you want to go. It may still be too early, so that's okay. At some point it will kick in, but ensure what you're doing is adding value to your career development. And if you're working someplace that you're not collecting feedback, go get it. And you can get it very respectfully, and most bosses will provide it, but you have to go get it if you're not getting it. It's not a good thing if you're not getting it. So I don't want people to think because I got all rosebuds and rainbows, or I'm not getting anything, that's good. it's not good in respect to your development.
Powerful, powerful. Just a few more quick questions.
Sure.
What, I was, what, I'm so curious, what is more powerful than networking?
Well, in my first book, Raise Your Visibility and Value, was written when networking was everything. And so when I left my last organization, Iron Mountain, in 2008, there was a mini recession going on, and networking became like the key activity. And it took many shapes and forms. And it was network this, network that, meet people, attend webinars, go to sessions, whatever. And I just sat back and said, I think networking is super important. 95% of my business as a leadership coach comes from networking and referrals, et cetera. So it is super important, but it's more of a sub activity. If you're really looking to grow and build your career, what you want to do is raise your visibility within your organization and industry. One way to do that's networking, but there's also other ways and other things that you can do in order to ensure that you're visible within your organization. And if you're visible, that you're adding value. And that's another important characteristic of the book, because in addition to raising your visibility, of which networking is a subcategory, you also have to ensure that you're providing value. Value is the new currency in organizations. When you look at a resume, people don't want to know necessarily what you did. They want to know how the organization was better because you were there. So don't tell me what you did. I'm assuming if you've made it this far that you can do all of the things that we've listed in the job description. How was your organization better? How did you provide them value in order to improve that experience? Those, being more visible and ensuring that you can talk about value are two very important characteristics that you need in order to ensure that your career is evolving in the way that you hoped.
So do you almost have an essay section then on your curriculum via that talks about the value you added?
Yes. Yeah. In the book, Raise Your Visibility and Value, we talk about 7 visibility accelerators. And these are things that you could do in order to be more visible within your organization. And then also we talk about value and what value means and how you can look for it, because different companies measure value differently. Again, there's no secret model that says, hey, here's how you provide value. But if you work for a call center, value might be how many calls per minute or how long your calls are, things of that nature. If you work for a law firm, it might be how many billable hours you have, right? So there's different organizations have different ways of measuring value. You need to know what they are, and you need to ensure that you're influencing them in positive ways if you can, because not everybody can. But if you can, you want to ensure that you're influencing those value perspectives as positively as possible.
This is wonderful, Ed. Thanks so much. How should, if people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way?
I would encourage people to go to my website, which is excellius.com, and that's EXCELLIUS.com. And the first thing that will happen is a pop-up will happen to see if you want to buy my most recent book, Drive Your Career. But if you don't and click the X, you'll see everything Ed Evarts there and any information that you might be interested in.
EXCELL what?
IUS, Excellius.
Excellius.com. And so like this? No, not yet. Like that?
That's it. Very good. Nice job.
Sweet. Sweet. Do you have any final words you want to leave the audience with?
Well, I just want to thank you, Jason, for having me on the podcast. I know we had some technical issues, but hopefully people still got our conversation in the pieces that made it through. Again, thank you. And I would just leave people with the thought that it's okay to be awkwardly awesome. We all are. And you need to understand what your own awesomeness is about and ensure that you're focused on it in order to drive your career in very positive and impactful ways.
Thank you so much for being you, for sharing your time, Ed. Thanks.